Hello and welcome to Smash Hit Sports. I'm your host, Cody. We had a wild-ass NFL trade deadline, one of the craziest maybe ever. I think we had the most trades in the history of the NFL trade deadline day. So an absolutely electric NFL trade deadline. And I have Taylor Cornell, host of the Who Dey Den Podcast, on. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about our Cincinnati Bengals. You can find him at _Taylor Cornell on Twitter. Taylor, welcome on, man. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Like you said before we hit record, we have interacted plenty of times on Twitter before. This is our first time, face to face with a microphone in front of us, so it's good to be on. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be absolutely electric. That being said, give Taylor a follow on Twitter. Give the Who Dey Den Podcast a listen. Both of those will be linked in the description of this video below, as well as in the description of the podcast if you listen to the audio version. But if you don't listen to or watch the video version, you absolutely should. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Smash Hit Sports. You know where to find it. But that being said, let's start with the NFL trade recap. We'll talk about our Bengals at the end because I don't want to be sad to start the podcast. Right. Let's start with maybe the biggest trade of the day. TJ Hawkinson was traded to the Vikings for a 2nd and 4th round pick. I was kind of stunned that the Lions moved on from Hawk. He's a damn good player.
Yeah, I thought maybe even weirder is to trade him within division. Like you hear about teams that don't even want to trade within their own conference, let alone their own division. To see him go to the Vikings was like, of all places, that just added to the shock level, I think. Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, and I think they got like a pretty reasonable haul for him since he's on his rookie deal, which is close to ending. A 2nd and a 4th kind of checks out. That being said, that Vikings team, they were already 6-1, and I know some people called them fraudulent because, Kirk Cousins, which is a totally understandable thing to say. Like if I was a Vikings fan, I wouldn't believe in the Vikings because I've watched Vikings football before. That being said, that offense, Adam Thielen, TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, you got to feel pretty confident if you're a Vikings fan moving forward.
Yeah, obviously Jefferson and Thielen are really the top 2 options there in the offense, but to have Hawkinson as your 3rd option that's going to soak up, 5 to 8 targets a game, I think you've got to feel pretty good about that, which is like similar to what he was already doing in Detroit anyways. But like you said, I actually like the deal for Detroit too, to get a 2nd rounder for a player that you probably weren't building around as much as we like Hawkinson, and he's a good player. You're probably not building around the tight end position. He's not like the George Kittles of the world or, Travis Kelce's that can just dominate games. So I was like, I kind of like it for both teams. Oh, I lost my
I
mind.
agree.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. There are very few tight ends that I would consider building an offense around or even trying to make sure that it's a major piece of my offense. I think Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews are the 3 big ones. Maybe Kyle Pitts, but we haven't seen it yet. I would like to see it from a top 5 draft pick, but it's interesting. If you're a Vikings fan, you got to be excited, which is a lot to say for Vikings fans because they haven't had a ton to be excited about in a while. Another big name, Calvin Ridley to the Jags for a 4th and a 5th. In my mind, this is an absolute fleece. That being said, I think part of this has to do with, obviously he's suspended this year for gambling on games, which play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Yeah. Calvin Ridley, don't be a dumbass. Come on. But I think part of this has to do with him taking the entire year off before. I don't know if he wanted to be in an Atlanta Falcons uniform, and now he gets a chance to play with a young Trevor Lawrence. This is an absolute win for the Jaguars, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you look at it, and even like the conditions around that 4th and whatever it could turn into or whatever are still, it still makes for a pretty low risk move for the Jags, and to have the potential to get a dude that the last time we saw him play full season, he put up 1,300 yards. I think that's pretty good. Really the only thing that, if you even want to call it a concern, which I don't think is really an adequate word to describe it, but it's like he's going to be a 28-year-old receiver that's coming off of very little football over the last 2 years. So like maybe there's a little bit of question about what are you getting the 1,300-yard receiver or not? But again, low risk for a 4th and 5th. Sure, why not? You're more likely to hit on Ridley than you are a rookie that you're going to take at one of those 2 spots.
I agree 100%. And the other thing too is I think this shows more than anything that they're like, hey, we're going to try to get Trevor Lawrence some weapons, right? And obviously they went out and they signed Christian Kirk and they brought in Marvin Jones, and those things are all great. None of those guys are a Calvin Ridley level receiver. Right. And that's what get your good young quarterback weapons. Kyler Murray got DeAndre Hopkins. Joe Burrow got both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. If you want your young quarterback to continue to develop, I think that's the path you got to take. And you see teams that haven't done that. The Giants are one that comes to mind. Like, they have done very little to help Daniel Jones, and he did not look good his first couple of seasons. We'll talk about Chase Claypool to the Bears, but the Bears didn't, have an awful receiving core, and Justin Fields hasn't really developed a whole hell of a lot. So it's good to see the Jaguars being competent. I think that helps in a division that, holy shit, that division stinks. Yeah. That AFC South is awful, but it's a good news for the Jags. I guess the Falcons felt like they had to get something for him if he wasn't going to either re-sign or whatever.
I mean, it kind of feels like one of those things where if you try to move him anywhere over the next until he takes the field ever again, it's going to feel like selling low maybe. But again, the timing kind of felt like, I mean, I know the deadline was today, but what's the rush? Like, you can't wait till the off season? I don't know. I mean, especially for a fourth and a fifth, like, no one's going to pay less than that in the off season. So I don't know. It was weird timing kind of, but I didn't expect to see him moved. I hadn't really, maybe they were out there, but I hadn't really seen rumblings of, hey, Ridley might be moved at the deadline.
Yeah, this was definitely the most shocking trade of the day. Like, I thought maybe TJ Hawkinson, because they might, the Lions are going to be sellers. They have one win, but Calvin Ridley was surprising to me. I did not see that coming. But one that was definitely, we heard in the rumor mill for a while now, Chase Claypool. I didn't necessarily think he would end up on the Bears, but he did. Chase Claypool to the Bears for a second. Now, we are Bengals fans, so take this for what you will. It may come off incredibly biased, but I'm a fan of Chase Claypool as a Notre Dame fan. He played a lot of good football for the Irish. That being said, holy shit, what an overpay. A second-round pick?
I think of all the trades, like even the shock level to the Hawkinson one and the surprise for the Ridley, this was the one that I think takes the cake as the weirdest one that I can't quite figure out from the perspective of the Bears, the thinking behind it, other than, hey, we want to get Fields some weapons. But again, at what cost and what kind of weapons? I mean, they traded... The reports where they traded the higher of their second round picks, likely
Correct.
The higher one, their own instead of the Ravens, which it's like Claypool was drafted 49th overall in 2020, has put up a couple, fine seasons, 800 yards, but nothing that's outstanding. And then you just gave up potentially more draft capital, like a pick that would be even sooner than 49th overall to get him. And, I don't know. I'm not sure he's an alpha dude, and I guess you could make the argument. I was talking to one of my friends today who's a Bears fan, and I appreciate his ability to see through his rose-colored glasses.
Gotta love a spin zone.
Oh yeah, he's like, all right, well, we've got Mooney, we've got Claypool now. You draft a stud next year, and he said you're looking at a Cincinnati Bengals light here, and I'm like, that's like very light. But yeah. I mean, I guess that could be the argument, is that you're getting a receiver that hopefully you can maybe not build around, but you can add to the arsenal. I just think it's also weird because everything I've seen from people that I follow that are Steelers fans are that Claypool doesn't like blocking. He's not good at blocking, and now you're adding him to an offense that is one of the most run heavy in the NFL. They're using Justin Fields more and more. I'm not sure that Claypool's going to enjoy being there. Like, it's just weird.
Yeah, and it's weird to see the Steelers. I guess it's not weird to see the Steelers be sellers, but the pick compensation really is what does it for me. Because right now the Bears have the number 12 overall pick, which 12th pick in the second round is what they gave up for Claypool.
Yeah.
You could have gotten, I don't know, George Pickens in the second round last year, and you passed up on him, and then now you're trading for Claypool. Just seems kind of weird. That being said, I get, at least they did something to help Justin Fields. I will give them that. I will give the Bears credit. I know I'm friends with a couple Bears fans living in northern Indiana, and there were quite a few that were clamoring for go out and get DJ Moore, which I don't know if that's necessarily the path you wanted to take, but I don't hate it. At least they did something to try to help Justin Fields. that being said, this trade is really meh to me, especially after what you got for Roquan, because that's what everybody's going to compare this to, right?
Exactly.
You just sold one of the best off-ball linebackers in football for the same comparison that you got the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver 3. That doesn't seem quite even. So,
yeah, and like I know part of that argument was maybe they didn't want to pay Roquan, which still I think it could be argued that he should have been a cornerstone of your defense. But regardless, it's like, yeah, you gave up a guy that is an impact player, one of the best at his position and what he does, for a guy that is definitely not going to be a franchise cornerstone. Like, I think best case scenario, you hope that Claypool develops into a 1,000-yard receiver, can complement Mooney and whoever else you get there. I can't imagine that you're going into this thinking Claypool's going to be our number one this year and next year and for the future. It's like, it was just weird. It's a complimentary piece that you just paid a high second-round pick for, but...
Yeah, I agree. They definitely need to add something else. And the Roquan, let's talk about the Roquan trade. I didn't have it in the show sheet, but it was recent. We might as well talk about it. That I understand why the Ravens did it. And now and we'll talk about the Bengals. Chidobe Awuzie's injury certainly hurts, but I understand why the Bengals or why the Ravens went out, got a stud off-ball linebacker. Here's the problem I see. Lamar is going to be a top 5, if not top 3 highest paid quarterback in the league this offseason. It is what it is. Now, the Ravens would be absolutely stupid to let him walk. There is that makes zero sense in my opinion. You now have to pay both Lamar Jackson and Roquan Smith this offseason, or you just traded a second-round pick for 10 football games worth of middle linebacker play. That does not make a whole hell of a lot of sense. So we know that Roquan Smith wants to be the highest paid linebacker in football. He was offered that by the Bears and turned it down because there wasn't enough guaranteed money. Mm-hmm. I'm stunned that the Ravens did this. They're going all in.
Yeah, I think, on the surface you look at it and say, anytime you can trade a second-round pick and get a guy that's one of the best at his position, no-brainer, you do it. But if you take the step back and you look at the ramifications of beyond, like you said, just beyond the next 10 games and whatever playoff run they make, if you win a Super Bowl, it doesn't matter what else happens. But if you don't win a Super Bowl, if you lose in the playoffs, if somehow you don't make the playoffs, then you look at this and you're staring in the offseason at a monster contract. And like you said, you got the Lamar contract looming. It's another one that I think it's easy to poke holes in it, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree 100%. Talking about other defenders that got traded, Bradley Chubb to the Dolphins for a first-round pick. I don't know who the Dolphins GM is, to be honest, off the top of my head, but holy shit, that man has put in some work. The draft capital that they got from the Trey Lance trade ended up being they traded up to acquire Jalen Waddle. They got Tyreek Hill, and they now have Bradley Chubb. That is a unbelievable W for the Dolphins. I think this was a great move. I think the Dolphins are absolutely poised to make a run for I don't think they're going to win their division, but I think they absolutely can make the wild card in the NFC or in the AFC.
Yeah.
And it bolsters what, in my opinion, was the biggest need on their defense in a pass rusher. Damn good move for the Dolphins.
Yeah. Apparently there was a report that they're already working on a deal for Chubb, so it looks like they're poised to make sure this isn't a rental type of thing, which if you give up a first-round pick, you're expecting that you're going to have to sign them to keep them long-term. It's definitely a good move for Miami. You look at their team and you don't see a ton of holes offensively as long as Tua stays healthy. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle have been outstanding. You look at the defensive side of the ball and you can say there's definitely some opportunities there, and shoring up that, again, in a year where they might not win the AFC East, but other than not winning the East, I think it's wide open for them to get into the playoffs through the wild card. And we've seen year after year, once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. So I thought it was a really good move for them as well.
Absolutely. And another move that the Dolphins have made, Jeff Wilson Jr. Don't think outside of obviously we're fantasy guys. I love Chase Edmonds was traded as a part of the Bradley Chubb trade, so he is no longer there. So that Dolphins backfield looks like it's going to be a split of Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert, which is essentially just saying, hey, we're going to do the 49ers backfield from last year, but in a different spot. I get it. I think if I were the Dolphins, I would have really tried to make a push for Cam Akers rather than get a guy like Jeff Wilson Jr., but I guess it's because of the system fit. It makes sense.
Yeah, I thought that Miami might be one of those teams, in addition to a couple others that might be in on Kareem Hunt. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But he was one that I'm like, you could argue that Kareem Hunt makes a difference at that running back position. Jeff Wilson obviously doesn't move the needle. He's more of a depth piece. But, hey, we've seen Raheem Mostert year after year. Knock on wood, hopefully this is the year he bucks the trend. But you definitely need depth behind Raheem Mostert.
That's for damn sure. That is for damn sure. I really don't know if Raheem Mostert has ever finished a full season in his career, which is kind of crazy. The last trade that actually happened, Nyheim Hines to the Bills. I think this is a solid, get a good pass catching running back for we've known they've wanted one, right? They drafted James Cook. I don't think has developed as quickly as they had hoped. They tried to steal J.D. McKissick from the Commanders. Now they get their pass catching running back in Nyheim Hines. I think it's going to be good for that offense. I think it's going to be good for Nyheim Hines and his fantasy value overall. I just a smart trade by the Bills and the Colts. I mean, you are absolutely sellers because that team just looks borderline pathetic.
Yeah, I thought the Bills might do something a little splashier because they'd been tied to some bigger names. But I think you look at the Hines thing and say, I do think it's like a little bit weird because I don't see the logical or like the obvious need for a pass catching back. Like I thought Singletary was fine there. So he got 23 receptions through 7 games. So he's fine. He's capable. He can do it. I don't think Hines is replacing Singletary at all as a runner. So you basically just got a guy that's only going to be a pass catcher, and it didn't really feel like he's the kind either that's going to propel the offense. But maybe I'm wrong. He'll make a splash play here or there, and it'll all be worth it.
Yeah, maybe. And another thing that I was thinking about too is maybe he impacts the return game as well, because I know he's returned punts and kicks for the Colts in the past. Yeah. So maybe that's just the Bills trying to, the rich get richer kind of thing. Trades that didn't happen that I thought would. Kareem Hunt is the name on everybody's list. Mm-hmm. I'm genuinely surprised that he was not gone. Do the Browns really think that they can make a push once Deshaun Watson comes back? Or is it because there's no way Hunt re-signs there? Not
His touches were so low the last couple weeks that I had convinced myself that even though the trade deadline was a couple weeks off at the time, that they were protecting their asset a little bit. And then he got all that run on Monday Night Football, and I thought, I understand the whole showcasing thing, but also that's risking an injury. That feels weird. And when I saw him get as much run as he did on Monday, I was thinking, I don't know if he's going to be traded now. It just felt really weird. So the usage, leading up to Monday Night Football felt like this is all pointing towards him being traded. And then to see him stay with Cleveland was bizarre.
Yeah, I don't love it. If I was a Browns fan, give me assets and we're taking our shot next year. Like you got Amari Cooper, right? If you can go and you have a solid offensive line, let's try to get a couple draft picks this year and, take a shot next year, get some weapons that are, maybe another weapon for Deshaun Watson and whatever. It is what it is. The Browns are a weird team. They've never been known for making great decisions. So we'll see how that unfolds. Another guy that I thought would be traded was Cam Akers. And according to his tweets, it looks like he's not intending to play for the Rams again. This is a weird, because we've seen guys hold out before. Le'Veon Bell held out because he wanted a bag. And I get that. I understand holding out for a bag. I don't understand what Cam Akers is holding out, because he has 2 years left on his rookie deal.
I think his feelings are hurt.
Pedestrian at best. He's been okay. He's been an okay running back, and I don't think that's worth holding out for.
Yeah, I think this, again, we of course we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but it really seems like there's stuff going on there that his feelings are hurt. But at this point, the trade deadline's passed, it's like, dude, you don't have any other options. I really don't think they're releasing him. again, because he's young and he's got so many years left. He's cheap, and you would hope you could salvage something or get something in a trade in the offseason. So it's like his options are a little limited right now.
Yeah, and at this point, you're just going to sit out and watch football for the rest of the year like the rest of us common folk? Whatever. I get it, but
he gets paid more handsomely than I do to do that, so I don't know. It's tempting. That's
for damn sure. For damn sure. Last trade that almost happened but didn't, Brandon Cooks. He has the I laugh at it every time a wide receiver tweets some shit, because it seems like there are just classes of tweets. Like quarterbacks tweet like, love God, super happy for this team, like go team. And then running backs are like grinding in the gym, whatever. And then the wide receivers tweet are like, I speak, the enemy speaks soft and holds a knife, and all sorts of cryptic shit. Brandon Cooks just basically went out and said this organization is bullshit and they're holding him back.
Yeah.
I'm stunned that he wasn't traded. He was not at practice today, and they played the Thursday night game this week. I'm interested to see if he holds out at this point. I don't understand why the Texans didn't move him, to be honest. He seems like the most tradable dude in the world because he's already been traded for like 3 times.
Yeah.
But that was one that I'm genuinely surprised, because he is not a part of the Texans' long-term plans. Not a chance.
I think, like, now that you've mentioned him, because I forgot about him when I previously dubbed Kareem Hunt as the most surprising, I actually think Brandon Cooks might be the most surprising, because you could make the argument that Kareem Hunt has value to the Browns this year if they think they can string together some wins and sneak out in the AFC North or wild card or whatever they are delusionally thinking might happen this year. You can make an argument that Kareem Hunt could be involved in that. Whereas you look at the Texans, and like you said, Brandon Cooks doesn't fit into their long-term plans. I think he's 28, 29 years old, something like that.
29,
so
yeah.
He's good and he's productive, but that was the obvious chip that you had to trade that you could have gotten some assets with, because you are way more than just a 29-year-old receiver away from competing. So then to see the tweets that came out from Brandon Cooks, it seemed like either he expected to be traded or wanted to be traded and wasn't. So that's going to be a really interesting situation to monitor going forward to see how that relationship is mended. Because again, like, these guys are, when it talk about Akers or Cooks, like, they're kind of out of options at this point. Like, they're not releasing Brandon Cooks.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's dead cap implications there and all that stuff. Like, it's not happening. The trade deadline's over. There aren't a lot of options unless this turns into a I don't know, there's NBA situations where it's like, John Wall, we're paying you, but please don't play for us.
Yeah.
Maybe they just send him home.
Like, hey,
the Texans have done it before.
The
they did it with Watson. So maybe they do it with Cooks and just say, hey, you don't have to play for us. But that'll be interesting whether he's suiting up for Houston anymore. Yeah,
it definitely a situation to monitor. My fantasy team hopes he plays because, God damn it, I need some fantasy points. But we'll see. I don't know. The Texans are, again, another one of those franchises that are just really known for making great decisions. So we'll see if this non-trade comes back to bite him in the ass. But we got to talk about our squad. The Cincinnati Bengals. We're sitting at 4-4. We have the Panthers this week, the bye week next week. Mm-hmm. I don't want to compare this year to last year. I feel like we have some totally different vibes going on.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the game first before we get into the season overall. Browns 32, Bengals 13. Nothing short of an absolute ass kicking from start to finish. They the Browns played better football at all 3 facets: special teams, offense, defense. What was your biggest takeaway from that game?
Ironically, I would say my biggest takeaway might be that I feel like I don't have any better idea of what this team without Jamar Chase is going to look like, because they failed in all 3 phases. So it's hard for me to say this team is going to be that bad without Jamar Chase, because we missed field goals, we missed extra points, we shanked punts on special teams. The defense struggled against Jacoby Brissett and Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, which I was not expecting the pass game to hurt us as much as it did. So that seemed a little unusual. We'll see, how that plays out with Awuzie out for the rest of the year. But there were some things that I just didn't expect to see. The offensive line played so poorly that I think our offense never got into a rhythm. So I left that game feeling like hopefully that's one that you chalk up to almost like last year's beatdown that we took against Cleveland. It was, hey, you put this one behind you. Don't think about it anymore, because there's not a whole lot you can take from this game. So I'm hoping that it falls into that category and is not a precursor of things to come over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and it's kind of what I took from it too. Is the Bengals have played weird games before, right? We had that weird ass game against the Jets last year where we lost, and it is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, our season's over." We were 5-4 around this time last year, so I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, we're done, we're finished, we're toast." I'm also not going to sit here and say that we're about to make another Super Bowl run, because it seems like last year's team was substantially healthier than this year's team. Obviously, the Jamar Chase injury is super impactful, and I agree with you. I don't think we have a full understanding of what the offense is going to do, because I don't think they have a full understanding of how this offense is going to look.
If the offensive line is going to play as poorly as they did Monday night, we're not going to see anything with the offense, because there was no opportunity to get into a rhythm. There was no chance to let plays develop, let routes develop. It was all checkdowns, because Burrow got a little skittish early on, and rightfully so, because he felt the pressure from Garrett and company. And so it's like, it's overly simplistic maybe, but if the offensive line plays that poorly against elite pass rushers, which we've seen this year in TJ Watt in week 1 and Micah Parsons in week 2, and now we've seen it here against Myles Garrett, it's like, if they can't handle elite pass rushers and the line struggles, the offense is going to look like doo-doo. And then in weeks where they don't have an elite pass rusher, like the Saints and like the Falcons, things will look a little bit better for us. So I don't know.
That's exactly what I was going to point out. As you look at the Parsons, Watt, Myles Garrett, we got our asses kicked and we lost those games. Those were our worst scoring outputs of the season. We scored 13, 17, and 20 against the Steelers, and that took overtime to do. Those were our worst outputs outside of playing against the Ravens, which it's just has not. We have not been great on the offensive line. Jonah Williams played his way out of an extension, like last night. That was very much a, hey, sorry, pal, that 5th year extent, or because we haven't accepted the 5th year option.
I think they picked up the 5th year before the season started. I think they picked it up, and that's guaranteed. So it's more of I think for me, a long-term thing to say, all right, which again, I don't really understand the reasoning of why you pick it up earlier than you have to, but whatever. But you look. I think
you have to pick it up a year in advance, if I'm not mistaken.
You might be right. I just think you look at that game last night, and again, unfortunately, it wasn't just an outlier. Like Jonah played poorly against elite pass rusher. He's had issues this season. I think he's given up 8 or 9 sacks according to PFF this year. We're halfway through the season, which is outrageous for your left tackle that was a first-round pick that's supposed to be your one consistent thing along this line. We had 4 new starters, and then you got Jonah Williams. I just think you look at that game and you say, yeah, Jonah's not in the long-term plans.
Yep, I would agree. They did pick up that 5th year, which has $12 million of dead cap, so he ain't getting cut either, because say what you want about the Bengals, they do not pay their players to not play.
That is correct.
He will be on the roster next season. Hopefully we can get him, a little bit of help. But, yeah, that just hasn't been a great look. Another position that really underperformed was Kevin Huber last night. Some tough punts. I said this from the beginning of the year. I said it in the offseason. I'm saying it again now. Drew Chrisman should have been our punter. He punted better in the preseason. He punted better in camp. They kept Kevin Huber on because he is the longest tenured player of this franchise, and they wanted to get him that longest tenure or the most consecutive or most starts in the history of a Bengals player, because he needed 2 of them. I
tweeted today.
Love the guy, but
yes, I tweeted today one of my biggest concerns with the Bengals front office. One area, think about, not to go on this huge tangent, but for 15, 20 years. They were the Bengals. They were cheap.
Yep.
They were all these things. And they've worked so hard over the last however many years to erase some of those things slowly but surely. And, we got a practice bubble now, and we're planning on signing Burrow to a big deal. Like, we're the naming rights to the stadium, all these things have pointed to this is a new era in Bengals football. But one area that I still do not feel like I trust the front office in is to make difficult business decisions. And not giving the job to Kevin Huber in the offseason, in the preseason, would have been a difficult business decision because of his local ties, how long he's been with the Bengals, what he means to the city, like whatever you want to paint it as, that would have been a difficult decision. And I didn't trust them to do it then. They obviously didn't, and we're seeing that now. I think on another degree, I don't think Joe Mixon has earned the touches that he's getting this year, but he's a captain. He's not going to get benched. He's not going to get cut. He's not going to, like, all of these things, because that would be a tough business decision, and they're just not going to do it. And That's an area I think that they need to improve on, because when you have a good team with Super Bowl aspirations, your margin of error is thin. You can't be making decisions that are easy and feel good if they don't result in solid play and wins and things like that. And I think that's the point where we're at with the franchise right now. So the Huber falls right under that of, I don't think he's earned that punting job. And then he shows us over and over, and it's like, guys, the difficult business decision to make your team better is to maybe move on from him and let Chrisman have a shot at it, but we'll see.
Yep, I agree 100%. And when you see teams that historically have been incredibly successful, the Patriots do not have difficulty making difficult decisions.
Right.
They have no hesitancy in letting players go when they think that they are not, their best option in order to help win a Super Bowl. The Steelers don't do that, and that we're kind of seeing the results of it. I think part of it has to do with the whole, we are trying to establish a history behind our franchise as well, with the Ring of Honor and what we're doing there. And I think, we're going to say, hey, we want him to be the longest tenure. I think that was a very deliberate decision. Unfortunately, we're seeing the negative consequences of that on the football field, which I hate when off the field decisions dictate on the field decisions. But at the same time, I understand why. I understand why. It's no different than, obviously much more impactful, but Big Ben should not have been the Steelers quarterback the last 2 years, but he was, because he was Big Ben and what he's done for that franchise.
Right. But, I wouldn't want to be in the position of embarrassing and humiliating Kevin Huber by cutting him mid-season when he's the longest tenured player. But at the same time, like you said, you look at some of the most successful teams and they're able to do things that are difficult to help the team. Now, again, is Kevin Huber's performance the reason we're losing games? No. It's not. But it kind of just Monday Night Football, when it rains, it pours. It was one of the things that went badly that you can just pile onto everything else.
For sure. And that's, again, the Bengals aren't going to pay him to not play. So, so we were talking about the trade deadline. Obviously, the Bengals didn't make any news. I heard briefly that there was some sort of rumor that they were interested in Cam Akers, which would have been pretty interesting. But with that being said, are we disappointed in the Bengals' lack of moves at the deadline? Surprised? How did you feel going into this trade deadline as a Bengals fan?
I would say there was a part of me that wanted the front office to show the fans that they're not content with the way the team is currently constructed. I think that would have been nice to do something to say, hey, we know we need to improve, and this is, an effort we're making to do it. You saw some of the top teams go get players, and I think on the other hand, though, if I'm being realistic, I'm not really that disappointed by it, because you would need to tell me what deal was there to be had that makes this team a bona fide contender right now. Like, if you give up the talk last week was go get a receiver, and I'm like, you're going to give up a pick for a receiver that's going to be relegated back to the wide receiver 4 when Jamar comes back. Like, so you got to get somebody that's going to be okay. You can go get Elijah Moore, who already is unhappy in New York.
Yep.
You're going to bring him here, and then you're going to relegate him back to wide. Like, that's not happening. You're going to spend a premium pick on a cornerback after the Wuzie injury. Maybe, but what if you do that and your offensive line still stinks the rest of the year, and then it doesn't matter, and you've just given up a first round pick or a second round pick for those guys? And I think a lot goes around to the position the team is in right now. They are going to have to be smart with their money, and part of that is keeping your draft picks to have cheap labor in the form of Cordell Volson, who's a rookie who's starting for us, and Cam Taylor-Britt's a rookie going to be starting for us. Dax Hill's going to be starting for us next year on a rookie contract for 3 or 4 more years after that. Like, they're going to have to do some of those things because they will be paying Burrow and trying to pay T and, you know, Logan Wilson and whoever they choose to pay. There's some big bills coming, and you can't just you look at the Miami Dolphins, and what they did was awesome. They also had extra first-round picks to deal with. So they can trade one away for a premium dude because guess what? They still have one. So it helps. We didn't have extra picks sitting around, extra first and extra second. So I'm actually not that disappointed because I think there are maybe more holes on this team right now, more areas of concern that could be addressed with just one trade.
I agree 100%. The other thing that I don't want this to come off as I think the Bengals season is lost. It absolutely is not, in no way, shape, or form. However, we are not one player away from being the best team in the AFC or the best team in football. And I understand, like, the Bengals aren't a team that make moves to make moves. Like, the Rams do that, and it's worked out for them at times, and at times it hasn't worked out for them. So I understand why we didn't, and I am totally fine with it. And now we're going to get to learn 2 things. One, can some of our younger guys step up? Is Dax Hill going to be the first-round player that we drafted him for? Is Cameron Taylor-Britt going to be a cornerback that we can rely on in the future? Because we have contracts at the cornerback position that are going to expire here soon. So those are things that we get to find out. And I'm not upset with that at all. Cordell Volson has been a great pick for us. I have been beyond happy with that.
You look at like the history of Bengals draft picks over the last 3 years, and we've done a pretty good job of hitting on a mix of stars and even those that aren't stars. Guys like Akeem Davis-Gaither, that when he's thrust into a starting role because Logan Wilson is injured, he's more than capable to be a starting linebacker in the NFL. We've hit on so many picks that you would now hopefully trust the scouting department. Maybe we've gotten lucky over a few years, but I would like to think that there's some principles or something that they're following, some process that they're following to try to get those. And you would like to think that, you could throw a 3rd-round pick at a guy and hope he comes in and provides you a little bit of depth at the quarterback position, but that 3rd-round pick also could turn out being a star that you get in the 3rd round, that they can play for 4 or 5 years for you. But it's a risk.
It could be a guy like a Logan Wilson or whatever. So we'll see how it turns out. So looking at the season as a whole, what is the biggest positive takeaway that you've had from the season so far? And then what's the biggest disappointment of like, hey, I was hoping for more here?
Biggest positive, I was going to go with Joe Burrow here because I think he's settled in really nicely after his really skittish start. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, that's kind of expected. We expected him to do that. So it's a positive, but wasn't really, very surprising necessarily. I thought you mentioned Cordell Volson before, and I actually have him down as, I think his development, he now looks like a long-term option at left guard. Probably never going to be a Pro Bowl guy, not going to be an all-pro guy, but he's going to be a solid option at left guard that you feel like, hey, we don't need to sink draft capital or sign a free agent to address the left guard spot for the next 3, 4, 5 years or whatever. We've got Cordell Volson. He's solid. We'll put pieces around him sort of thing. I've been pretty surprised about that. I thought he would struggle, and I'm still of the belief that I had Paul Dehner Jr. on back in July on my podcast, and he said that he really believes that the Bengals did not draft Volson with an intention of starting him whatsoever. It was going to be Jackson Carman's job, and we know how that turned out. So I think that the Bengals were drafting him as depth. He's turned into a starter, and a solid starter that's getting better every week. So for me, I think he's the biggest positive. There's a few different areas you could go there, but I've been pleasantly surprised by him.
Yeah, love to see it. What about the biggest disappointment?
Joe Mixon, dude. Joe Mixon has been on my poop list all season long, and I cut him a little bit of slack the last couple of weeks because when the Bengals went to shotgun almost exclusively, we've seen a lot more north-south running from Joe Mixon when he gets handoffs. And it's like, if he could just get 3, 4, 5 yards, even if he's only getting 8 carries a game, it's the efficiency that matters more than 25 carries for 125 yards sort of thing. But the bar was so low that I just wanted him to be able to fall forward for 3 yards. And when he was doing it, I was like, yeah, that's good. But then you see Samaje Perine get into the game and get a handoff. And no matter what the situation is, when he gets a handoff, he's falling forward for a couple of yards. You watch guys, like, again, comparing them to an elite player like Nick Chubb maybe isn't fair, but even looking at Kareem Hunt, the way he runs the ball, like, they are violent runners that are always falling forward, always breaking tackles, always getting more. And Joe Mixon has been the least elusive running back in the NFL, does not force many missed tackles at all. Actually, I tweeted today that Joe Burrow has forced a higher percentage of missed tackles on his rushes than Joe Mixon, and Joe Burrow is not known for his elusiveness by any means. And they've used Mixon more this year as a pass catcher. Obviously, he's already got as many receptions as he did last year, I believe, halfway through this season. So it's been on display even more that when he gets the ball in the flat, he is not going to make a guy miss. Doesn't matter the size of the dude. Could be a linebacker that he should be faster than. Could be a cornerback that he's got 40 pounds on. It doesn't matter. If they get a hand on him, he's going down. He's probably falling backwards. And it's been the most frustrating thing because I really think we need a running game to help balance things out, and it just hasn't been there.
I agree with that take. I don't know if he's been my biggest disappointment. I'm going to lead my biggest disappointment also into my next question. Uh-oh. I think the play calling this year has been borderline offensive to the game of football as a whole. Some of the things I would like to preface this with, I like Zac Taylor as a head coach. I hate Zac Taylor, the play caller. The pitch plays on 4th and 1, if I have to watch one more of those this season, I will bash my head into a concrete wall. It has been so frustrating to watch. We are the worst team in football on 4th down. From a efficiency standpoint, it has just been brutal. It's been ugly to watch. There for a brief moment in time, like a 3-game stretch at the beginning of the year, it was run, pass, and I thought I was going to end it all. It was one of the most frustrating things I've ever seen. I think great coaches sometimes make the decision to say, hey, I need to take some stuff off my plate. I don't think mid-season is the time to do it, but I look at Nick Sirianni, who said, hey, I was doing a decent enough job calling plays. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to let my play caller do his thing, and I'm going to be a phenomenal head coach. And that's what it – now, obviously, there's a lot more that has gone on to the Eagles' success, but I think that's part of the reason why their offense has taken that next step. I would love to see something similar happen to the Bengals because, oh, my God, that play calling is dog shit. All right, I'm off my high horse. What are your thoughts on Zac Taylor and how he's done through 7 games this season?
I'm a Zac Taylor apologist, so
okay. So we may have differing opinions here.
I would say where I struggle is that I think at best he's been inconsistent as a play caller. There are games where he's dialing things up and it's like, that's a nice concept, that's a nice play call, that's a nice decision, whatever. There are games that, like you mentioned, the pitches on 4th and 1 where you're like, what are we doing? But I think my main issue with Zac Taylor, and some of it is he's a head coach, so he should take the blame for a lot of things, but I think a lot of times play calling is an overused and somewhat oversimplified complaint when some people don't necessarily it's just the easiest thing to fall back on. Like last night was a brutal game to watch. I don't come out of that game saying, man, that play calling was bad. I look at it as the offensive line hamstrung us so poorly that we could not. I don't know what the play calls were because Joe Burrow didn't have time to find his reads. And there is something to be said about, I think, the biggest opportunity area for Zac Taylor as a play caller is to make things easier for his offense. Everything is so difficult when we're going up against elite pass rushers. And we've seen, when we go up against not so great defenses, we can look awesome. But if you're going up against defenses, you cannot be a team that you just know going into a game, oh, we're not going to be able to do much defensive or offensively because their defensive line is so good. That's not okay. So I think he could do a lot better job of, whether it's moving the pocket, maybe Joe Burrow doesn't want to move the pocket, I don't know, but just different creativity, wrinkles, anything to add something new. But I think that Zac Taylor has improved as the season went along. I thought early on
I will agree with that
awful.
100%.
Early on was bad, and I think that starting in the Ravens game, we started to see some of the concepts change a little bit. We finally got away from, hey, first down, we're going under center, and when we go under center, we're running the ball. And when we run the ball, it's a wide zone. I mean, those three things were true every time. First down equals under center, which equals run, which equals wide zone. It was the same thing. And at least now, I know we're almost exclusively shotgun, which I've seen some people really don't like that either. But at least we have an identity.
We're much better in that than we were.
And
under
again,
center.
It allows Joe Mixon to ideally get the ball and go straight ahead and hopefully get 4 yards versus go wide zone, stretch it out, and get -2 yards as he dances around in the backfield. So I think there has been some evolving and adapting. I would say sometimes he's a little slow. I don't see a lot of in-game adapting. Game to game, you can see changes, but in game, I don't see enough changes. So I would say that's an issue. And then, like I said, I think he could help make things easier for his offense. It shouldn't be as difficult as it is every time we go up against elite pass rusher. I mean, the Cowboys are a good defense, but offenses still can have success against them, even with Michael Parsons out there. You just got to find ways to work around it.
The Bears had a hell of a game against the Cowboys. So, and obviously, I am being a tough critic. This is the team that I love, but
it's fair.
And I like the scheme. I think the scheme overall is a good scheme. It's just there are times where it's like we're going to be near the goal line and we're going to run the Philly special with a quarterback that just tore his ACL last season. Like, what if – I understand being creative. I'm fine with you being creative. But, like, what if we didn't use the most overused trick play in the history of football the last 5 years?
Yeah.
There are other ways to be innovative in football without doing that. So – but that being said,
he does seem a little stuck in his ways. I mean, when you look at his 11 personnel usage, and I mean, he almost exclusively runs 11 personnel, or sometimes he'll go empty and stuff. But like, it's a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and when one of your top 3 receivers goes down, you might need to adjust and not go 3 wide receiver, because I don't want to see Mike Thomas ever take the field unless he's on the punt coverage team. So maybe that is an opportunity to adjust instead of just keep doing what you usually do. And again, offensive line made it difficult for us to see what that would have looked like. But I also saw Mike Thomas drop a pass in the middle of the field, bounce off his hands, and I've seen enough of that. So maybe try something a little bit different. So.
Yeah, and I like people complain about the 11 personnel, but like when they're healthy, that's the right personnel to be in. You want Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins on the field. Like, that's why you have the best or one of the best wide receiver groups in the league, is to use the damn guys. Like, get them out there. But, I totally agree. You got to, you have to adapt when shit goes wrong. And right now, shit is not, and I'm not going to sit here and make excuses, but DJ Reader being out against one of the best rushing teams in football certainly hurts. And Jamar Chase being out certainly hurts. And Awuzie leaving that game certainly hurts. The next stretch of games for the Cincinnati Bengals, in my opinion, is kind of one of those it's the SpongeBob outside of the salty spittoon. How tough are you? You know what I mean? How tough are you? Because you could absolutely drop a game to the Panthers and be like, oh, well, we were hurt.
Yeah.
But that's not what good teams do. So how good of a team are you? Can you get into the bye week with a winning record and say, all right, let's try to get a little healthy. Let's install what we need to install while we are missing guys like Chase and Awuzie and Reader, and make sure that we come out of that bye strong. So I'm asking you, what are your expectations for the Bengals the rest of the season?
I think that we are going to have an idea of how this season is going to go after the next 3 games. I think December 4th is when we play the Chiefs at home.
Yep.
We have 3 games leading up to there, 3 very winnable games, and at minimum, you have to win 2 of those 3. I mean, ideally, you win all 3, but you have to win 2 out of the 3, because if you go into December with a losing record and you still have the Chiefs, you still have the Browns, you still have the Bills, you still have the Ravens, you still have the Buccaneers, you still have the Patriots. Like, you're not winning 10 games and you're not getting to the playoffs. So this is a gut check time, I think, for this team over the next 3 games that you absolutely must win, at least 2 of them. I was having this conversation with one of my friends today of the expectations are raised so much for this team of, you now have to get to the playoffs. If this was reversed and we were having this season last year,
yep,
and we were sitting at 4-4, we'd all be so happy. And then if we made it to the Super Bowl this year, we'd be like, oh, we're right on time. This is perfect. But it's different. We went to the Super Bowl last year. It happened, and now those are the expectations, and you have to, at minimum, get to the playoffs and ideally at least win 1 playoff game. So I think that my expectations for this team are wild card spot. I think winning the division's almost completely out of the picture, sitting at 0-3 right now in the division. There's a lot that has to go your way.
Having 3 losses, just because you have a loss to the Browns, a loss to the Steelers, and a loss to the Ravens, like that. That's tough to come back from and still win your division. Right now, it's possible. It's absolutely possible, but damn, does it make it tough.
There's a lot that's going to have to go your way, because it's going to come down to Week 17 and Week 18, and you're going to be looking at tiebreakers, and we're going to lose this tiebreaker because we've lost more division games or more conference games or whatever it is. Yep. So I think those are going to hurt for divisional purposes. I think we can still get to the wild card spot. I think the AFC isn't as strong as what we thought it would be. We thought the Broncos and the Raiders were all going to be fighting for wild card spots, and the Dolphins, and maybe a surprise team like the Jags or something. And it doesn't. It's wide open. And we saw the team get hot last year. It's going to be different this year because we're not going to have Chase for another month probably. But my expectations for the team are still, you got to find a way to get to the playoffs or get yourself into a position that, you win 10 games, and, if you don't get to the playoffs because you lost a tiebreaker, that sucks. But to claw to 10 wins, I think would be at minimum what your goal is at this point, and what I expect. I reserve the right to change that after the next 3 weeks, though, if they lose a couple games.
Well, we'll have to get you back on if that's the case, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, it brings me to the that video clip that goes viral every now and again about Rex Ryan. He's like, everybody wants to be an underdog. Fuck that. The best place to be is when the expectations are high. Mm-hmm. It's the expectations are high for the Bengals. You went to the Super Bowl last year. That's a good thing. We haven't had incredibly high expectations, at least this high of expectations in, quite a few damn years. So while it sucks we're sitting here feeling a little disappointed about our team because they're 500. Do you know how badly I would have given for a 500 football team 3 years ago? I'd have donated a kidney. So
three walk-off losses so far. I mean, you're that close to being 6-2 or something. So
and you're still playing good football. It's not great football. It's good football. There's a lot of good football left in this team. I'm excited. It's still early. It's still early. We still got 10 weeks of football left, man. We're sitting here 1st of November. By the time you guys are listening to this, it'll be November 3rd. We still got so much football ahead of us. I cannot wait. Taylor, thanks so much for coming on, man. Again, if you guys don't already follow Taylor, you absolutely should. @_Taylor Cornell. His ad is on the screen. It'll be in the description if you're listening to the audio version of this. And go listen to the Who Dey Den if you are a Bengals fan. Absolutely must listen to every single episode. I appreciate you guys. We will see you in the next one.